She humiliated him in front of a packed restaurant, called him broke, called him an embarrassment, smiled while she did it. What she didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that the man she was destroying with her words had just signed a $280 million deal. And the letter he left her that night, it didn't say what you think. Stay right there, because this story is about to flip everything you think you know. Wife humiliates husband for being poor, unaware he's a billionaire in disguise. She pointed at him across a restaurant full of people. Her voice was loud enough for every single table to hear. "You are embarrassing me. You have always embarrassed me. Look at you. You look like you can't even afford this water." The man sitting across from her didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked at her calm, quiet, still, and slowly placed his napkin on the table. He stood up, buttoned his old, worn jacket, and walked out. The whole restaurant watched him go. Some people shook their heads. Some whispered. One woman near the window wiped a tear. Nobody knew who that man really was. Nobody, not even his wife, knew that in less than 24 hours, everything she thought she knew about her life was going to fall apart. But before we get to that moment, before we get to the part that's going to make your jaw drop, we have to go back to where this all began. Because this story, it doesn't start in that restaurant. It starts in a small, dusty town with a boy who had nothing and a dream that everybody laughed at. His name was Daniel Cooper. He grew up in a 2-bedroom house in Clarksville, Tennessee, with a leaky roof, a broken heater, and a father who worked double shifts at a steel mill 6 days a week just to keep the lights on. Daniel wasn't born with any advantages, no trust fund, no connections, no fancy last name. What he had was a notebook, a beat-up spiral notebook he carried everywhere, where he wrote down every single business idea that came into his head. His teachers thought it was cute. His classmates thought it was weird. But Daniel never stopped writing. By the time he was 16, he had filled 47 notebooks. And by the time he was 22, working a night shift at a gas station outside of Nashville, he had an idea that he couldn't shake. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't complicated. It was a simple software system that could help small trucking companies manage their routes, their drivers, and their fuel costs all in one place. Back then, most of them were still using paper logs and spreadsheets held together with staples and prayers. He spent 8 months building it on a second-hand laptop he bought from a pawn shop. And then he met her. Her name was Amber. She was beautiful, confident, the kind of woman who walked into a room and made everyone else feel like they were standing at the wrong party. She came from a middle-class family in Memphis. Her father was a dentist. Her mother taught piano lessons. They weren't rich, but they had a certain image they liked to keep up: nice clothes, nice car, nice neighborhood. Appearances mattered in Amber's world. They mattered more than almost anything. When she met Daniel, he was still working nights. His car had 200,000 miles on it. His shoes had a hole in the left sole that he covered with a piece of cardboard. But he was smart, and he was kind, and he looked at her like she was the most important thing in any room she walked into, so she said yes when he asked her to marry him. And for a little while, for a brief, shining little while, they were happy. If you're enjoying this story already and you want to see more stories like this one, hit that subscribe button right now. We post new videos every week, and I promise you, this one is only going to get better. Where were we? Right, Daniel and Amber happy for a little while. The problem started slowly, the way most problems do. Daniel's software company was starting to grow. Slowly at first, a few clients here, a few referrals there. He was putting every dollar back into the business, which meant some months things were tight, really tight. And Amber did not do tight. She didn't understand why they couldn't take the vacation her friend Karen took to Cancun. She didn't understand why they had to buy the store brand cereal instead of the name brand. She didn't understand why Daniel came home every night with dark circles under his eyes, working until 2, 3 in the morning on a company that barely pays you anything. She started to say things, small things at first, a comment about his car, a joke at dinner about his old watch, a sigh when he mentioned reinvesting the profits instead of taking them home. And Daniel, patient, quiet Daniel, absorbed all of it, because he believed that one day she would understand. One day she would see what he was building. He had no idea that one day would be the worst day of both their lives. Here is the thing nobody knew about Daniel Cooper. Not his wife, not his neighbors, not the guys at his old gas station job. His software company, the one Amber rolled her eyes about, had been acquired. Quietly, privately, with a confidentiality agreement that kept it out of the news. A logistics giant out of Atlanta had bought Daniel's company for $280 million. The deal closed on a Tuesday morning. Daniel sat in a lawyer's office in a suit he'd borrowed from his cousin, signed his name on 17 pages of documents, shook hands with men in ties that cost more than his first car, and then drove home in his old truck, stopped at a drive-thru, and ordered a medium coffee. He didn't change anything. Not yet. He wasn't ready. And more than that, he wasn't sure Amber was ready, or rather, he wasn't sure he knew who Amber really was yet. Because the acquisition came with a clause, he had to stay on as a consultant for 12 months. He had to keep a low profile, no public announcements, no splashy lifestyle changes, just wait. So he waited, and he watched, and what he saw during those 12 months broke something in him that he didn't even know was there. Because the moment Daniel stopped being visibly poor, the moment he started showing up in meetings, flying to Atlanta twice a month, coming home tired but different, Amber didn't get warmer. She got colder. She wasn't proud of him. She was suspicious. She started asking questions he didn't know how to answer yet. Who are these people you keep meeting? Why won't you tell me more? Why do you still dress like that if you're doing so well? And Daniel realized something that made his chest ache. She didn't want him to succeed quietly. She wanted to show off a success she could understand, a title, a corner office, something she could post on Instagram. He made a decision right then, and it was the kind of decision that would change everything. He told no one. He kept the old truck. He kept the worn jacket. He kept the life that looked exactly like the life Amber had always complained about. He wanted to know, needed to know, who she really was when she thought there was nothing to gain. Now we're back to that restaurant. Back to that moment. It was their 9th wedding anniversary. Daniel had made a reservation at a nice place, not the fanciest in town, but good. The kind of place with white tablecloths and candles on every table. He wore the jacket, the old one, because he was testing something. He needed to know something. Amber showed up 40 minutes late in a new dress she hadn't told him about. She sat down, looked around the restaurant, looked at him, and something shifted in her eyes. Like she had just noticed for the first time exactly where they were sitting and who she was sitting with. She started with the small cuts, the way she always did. You couldn't have worn something nicer tonight. It's our anniversary, Daniel. I told you last week I wanted to go to Marchetti's. This place is fine. Did you at least make sure we have a good table? Because I'm not going to sit by the kitchen. Daniel said nothing. He ordered water. He smiled at the waiter. He asked Amber how her day had been. But Amber wasn't interested in her day right now. She was looking around the restaurant. She had spotted someone, a man at a corner table she recognized. His name was Preston. He'd gone to the same college as her. He was wearing a suit that probably cost $3,000. And his wife or girlfriend, Daniel wasn't sure, was wearing a diamond that caught the light from across the room. Amber's entire posture changed. She waved. Preston waved back, and before Daniel could say a word, Preston and his companion were walking over. Amber, oh my gosh, how long has it been? Too long, Amber laughed, a laugh Daniel barely recognized, bright and performative and aimed at someone else. The introductions happened, and that is when Amber said it. "This is my husband, Daniel." A pause, a very deliberate pause. "He's between things right now." Preston nodded politely. His companion smiled. And something cracked open in Daniel's chest. Between things. That's what she called him, in front of strangers, on their anniversary, with that smile she used when she wanted to make it clear that she was better than whatever situation she found herself in. Preston asked what Daniel did, and before Daniel could answer, Amber jumped in again. "He had a little software thing. It didn't really go anywhere. We're just figuring out the next chapter." Daniel looked at his wife, really looked at her, and she looked back at him with eyes that said, "Please don't embarrass me. Please just go along with this. Please be small so I can look bigger." That was the moment Daniel had been waiting for without even fully knowing it. He put down his napkin. He stood up. He looked at Preston, at Amber, at the table full of white linens and flickering candles, and he said quietly, evenly, without a single crack in his voice, "It was nice to meet you, Preston." And he walked out. He didn't slam the door, he didn't make a scene, he just left, and the whole restaurant watched him go. Amber sat at that table for 11 minutes before she called him. He didn't answer. She called again. Nothing. She texted. Nothing. She drove home in silence. And when she got there, Daniel was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a manila envelope. "Sit down," he said. "I have something to show you." And now, right now, is the part that nobody saw coming. Not Amber, not you, not anyone. Stay with me, because what Daniel did next was not what you think. He didn't slide the acquisition papers across the table. He didn't say, "Surprise, I'm rich, look how wrong you were." He wasn't interested in winning an argument. He wasn't interested in revenge. He was interested in something much harder to explain. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table, a letter, handwritten. Amber picked it up, and she read. And as she read, her face changed. The performance fell away. The careful, curated expression she wore like a mask in public, it crumbled, line by line, word by word. Because Daniel hadn't written her a letter about the money. He'd written her a letter about the cardboard. The piece of cardboard he used to cover the hole in his shoe when they were dating. He wrote about how she never noticed it, or if she did, she never said a word. How in those early days, before the frustration, before the comments, before the sighing, she used to look at him like he was enough, like he was more than enough. He wrote about the first time she laughed at something he said, a stupid joke about a gas station hot dog, and how in that moment he thought, "This is the woman I want to build something with." He wrote about the night they sat on the hood of his busted old car and looked at the stars over Nashville, and she said, "I don't care where we end up. I just want to get there with you." He wrote, "I kept waiting for that woman to come back. I kept building, kept working, kept believing that if I could just show you something real, something true, you'd remember who we were. But tonight I realized something. The woman in that restaurant was not hiding a better version of herself. She was showing me exactly who she'd become, and I have to love you enough to be honest about that." And at the very bottom of the letter, a single line. "The company sold for $280 million. I signed the papers alone because I didn't know if I could trust you with the news. Tonight told me everything I needed to know." Amber didn't speak for a very long time. When she finally did, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Daniel." "I know," he said, "I know." And for the first time in a very long time, he didn't say anything else. What happened next surprised people who heard the story, because this isn't the kind of story that ends the way you expect. Daniel didn't file for divorce the next morning. He didn't move out. He didn't post anything on social media. He didn't tell Preston or Karen or anyone else the truth. He asked Amber one question. Do you want to try? Not I forgive you. Not it's fine. Not a grand dramatic gesture or a screaming match or a lawyer on speed dial. Just, do you want to try? Because here is the thing about Daniel Cooper that you have to understand. He wasn't a man built for revenge. He was built for building. And for a long time, the most important thing he had tried to build was his marriage. Amber looked at him across that kitchen table, this woman who had publicly called him small, who had said between things with a smile designed to shrink him, and she cried. Not performative crying, real crying, the ugly kind, the kind that comes from somewhere you've been pushing down for years. She said, I don't recognize myself. I don't know when I stopped being someone I liked. And that right there was the most honest thing she had said to him in years. They spent the next 3 months in therapy, separately, together. It was brutal. It was uncomfortable. There were sessions where neither of them spoke for long stretches of silence that felt like they could swallow the whole room. Amber's therapist helped her trace it back, the obsession with appearances, the shame she felt about wanting more, the way she had quietly started measuring her own worth against other people's visible success. It didn't excuse what she did in that restaurant. Nothing would, but it explained it. An explanation is the beginning of change. Daniel's therapist asked him why he had kept the secret for so long. He said, because I needed to know if she loved me, the real me, not the money. The therapist said, and what did you find out? Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I found out she forgot how to. Another pause. But I'm not sure she always did. And here is where the story turns, one final time. 6 months after that night at the restaurant, Amber came home with something. Not jewelry, not an apology gift, not something she bought to smooth things over. She came home with a box, an old shoe box taped shut, with her name written on it in handwriting that wasn't hers. She said, I want to see my mom this weekend. She had this in the attic. She said she was saving it for the right time. Inside the box was a stack of letters, old ones 30 years old, maybe more, and newspaper clippings and photographs. And a business card that had a name on it that made Daniel go completely still. Her father's name. Amber's father, the dentist with the nice house and the steady income, and the man who had looked at young Daniel Cooper with barely concealed pity at every holiday dinner, had his own story. A story Amber had never been told. Before the dental practice, before the house in Memphis, before everything Amber grew up taking for granted as normal and stable and permanent. Her father had been broke, genuinely, completely broke. He had started a small business in his 20s that failed spectacularly. He had borrowed money from family members and paid it back one painful dollar at a time. He had worn shoes with holes in them. He had lived in a one-room apartment and eaten peanut butter sandwiches for dinner 3 nights a week. And the newspaper clippings. They were articles about a young man in Memphis who refused to quit, who rebuilt, who started over, who became, slowly and quietly, exactly who he wanted to be. He had never told his daughter any of this because he was ashamed, because in his mind the struggle was something to hide, not something to share. So he hid it. And without meaning to, he taught his daughter that poverty was shameful. That struggle was something you looked away from. That success was supposed to look a certain way, and anything less was something to be embarrassed about. Amber held those letters and she wept. Not because of what they said about her father, but because of what they said about her husband, the man she had stood across from in a restaurant and reduced to nothing with her words, the man who had been her father's story walking right in front of her every single day, and she had been too blinded by what she thought she knew to see it. Today, Daniel and Amber Cooper live in a house outside of Nashville. It is not the biggest house on the street. They could afford bigger, but Daniel said he wanted to stay connected to something real, and Amber agreed. On their kitchen wall, not in the entryway where guests can see it, Not in the dining room where it could be a conversation piece. On the wall of their kitchen where it's just for them, there is a framed piece of cardboard. The piece of cardboard Daniel used to cover the hole in his shoe. Amber found it in his old jacket pocket. She had it framed herself, and she hung it there herself. And sometimes when things get hard, when old patterns start creeping back, when she feels the pull of comparison or status or keeping up with Preston's corner table, she looks at that piece of cardboard and she remembers. She remembers that the most important man in her life once fixed his shoe with nothing and built something extraordinary anyway. And she almost missed it. She almost missed all of it. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. You never know who in your life is quietly carrying something extraordinary that the rest of the world can't see yet. Hit the like button. Leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever misjudged someone because of what they looked like on the outside? Have you ever been the person who was misjudged? I read every single comment, and I'll see you in the next one.